200 boats, over $50 million in yachts, all trapped behind a steel gate I built with my own hands. Margaret Eastwood thought she could bully a grieving widower. She called my late wife's memorial boat an eyesore, threatened to have it towed, even tried to have me arrested. What Margaret didn't know was that every single yacht in her precious Marina had to cross my easement to touch open water, including her own floating palace. So Tuesday morning, I pressed one button on my phone. Click. Gate closed. Marina access terminated. The sound of 200 diesel engines idling helplessly while their owners pounded on my fence. Pure poetry. What would you do if some HOA Karen called your spouse's memorial an eyesore? My name's Dale Hutchinson. I'm 62, been welding steel for 40 years, and recently became something I never wanted to be, a widower. Sarah and I had 35 beautiful years together before cancer took her last spring. Our daughter Jessica lives up in Portland with the grandkids I barely see. The only thing keeping me sane? Our 1988 Grady White fishing boat, Sarah's Dream. We bought her for our 10th anniversary with money we probably shouldn't have spent. But God, the memories we made on that boat. Sarah loved sitting in the captain's chair at sunrise, coffee steaming in the cool morning air, watching the world wake up over Clearwater Marina. Every weekend now, I sit in that same chair, listening to her favorite wind chimes still hanging from the canopy. The steering wheel's worn smooth from both our hands over the years. The smell of marine diesel mixing with my morning coffee brings her back, just for a moment. Clearwater Point isn't exactly my crowd. It's one of those fancy waterfront communities where $500,000 condos overlook million-dollar yachts. I inherited my modest two-bedroom from my parents, prime waterfront property that sticks out like a sore thumb among all the glass and chrome. The marina holds 200 slips, and let me tell you, some of these boats cost more than most people's houses. 40-foot cigarette boats, 60-foot Hatteras yachts, custom sailboats with more electronics than the space shuttle. And then there's my little Grady White, sitting quietly in slip 37, minding her own business. That's where Margaret Eastwood comes in, 49 years old, HOA president, wealth management advisor, and the kind of woman who drives a pearl-white Tesla with vanity plates. She lives in an $800,000 penthouse overlooking the marina, wears $300 athleisure outfits to board meetings, and treats anyone who doesn't drive a luxury car like they're invisible. On a Tuesday morning in early May, Margaret decided to pay me a personal visit. I watched her Tesla pull up, parking sideways across my driveway like she owned the place. Those designer sunglasses probably cost more than my monthly boat slip fees. "Mr. Hutchinson," she said, not even bothering with pleasantries. Her voice had that fake sweet tone people use when they're about to ruin your day. "Your fishing boat doesn't align with our community aesthetic standards." She handed me an official-looking document. "Removal required within 72 hours. I looked down at the violation notice, then back at her Tesla blocking my driveway. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here's someone lecturing me about property respect while trespassing on mine. "What aesthetic standards?" I asked. "I've had this boat here for 15 years. Never been a problem before." Margaret's sunglasses reflected my eyesore boat, which frankly was in better condition than half the floating mansions in this marina. "The board has implemented new recreational watercraft guidelines. Your vessel fails to meet current standards." Now, I'd lived here my whole life. I knew every inch of the original HOA documents my parents signed in 1987. There were no recreational watercraft guidelines back then. This was fresh bureaucratic nonsense, and we both knew it. "I'll need to see these new guidelines," I said. "They're available for review during normal business hours." Margaret checked her Apple Watch like she had somewhere important to be. 72 hours, Mr. Hutchinson. The community appreciates your cooperation." As she click-clacked back to her Tesla in her designer heels, I noticed something interesting. My neighbor's 45-foot Bertram yacht hadn't run in 3 years. Engine's been dead since Obama was president. But somehow that floating dock ornament qualified as aesthetically acceptable while my pristine fishing boat didn't. The taste of injustice is metallic, like biting tinfoil. But as I stood there watching Margaret drive away, I had no idea I was about to discover something that would turn her entire power trip upside down. 3 days later, Margaret made good on her threat. A bright yellow violation notice appeared on my boat's windshield. $500 per day until removal. Apparently my memorial to Sarah was now costing me more than my mortgage. But here's where it got interesting. That same morning, I took a walk around the marina with my coffee, really paying attention for the first time in months. Tommy Rodriguez lives 3 slips down in a 40-foot wellcraft that's been leaking oil into the water for 6 months. No violation notice. The Peterson's 28-foot Sea Ray has been sitting on blocks for engine work since Christmas. No violation notice. And then there's the crown jewel, Senator Bradley's 60-foot Hatteras political capital. This floating palace violates every supposed aesthetic standard Margaret could dream up. Rust stains down the hull, torn awnings, and a generator that sounds like a dying whale every time he fires it up. But somehow it qualified for something called a classic vessel exemption. Funny how these exemptions work when you donate 50 grand to the Marina Restoration Fund every year. I've never been one to take injustice lying down. Sarah used to say I was like a dog with a bone when something wasn't fair. So I drove down to the county courthouse that afternoon, breathing in that musty smell of old paper and fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I need to see the original property deeds for Clearwater Point, I told the clerk. Everything from 1987. Now, here's something most people don't know about property law. Every piece of real estate has a paper trail going back decades, sometimes centuries. Easements, restrictions, mineral rights, access agreements, it's all documented in those dusty filing cabinets. I spent 4 hours going through documents that hadn't seen daylight since the Reagan administration. Property surveys, utility easements, access agreements, the whole 9 yards. And that's when I found something that made my heart skip a beat. The original marina development required water access for all 200 slips. But here's the kicker. The only legal path from the marina to the actual waterway ran through a 50-foot strip of land that belonged to exactly one property owner. My property. My parents had signed something called a permissive easement back in 1987, allowing marina traffic to cross our land to reach the water. But the really beautiful part? This wasn't a permanent easement. It was revocable at the landowner's discretion with 30 days' notice. Translation: every single boat in that marina, all 200 slips worth $50 million in floating assets, depended on my permission to reach the water, and I could revoke that permission anytime I wanted. I sat there in that courthouse chair, staring at documents that were older than my daughter, trying to process what this meant. Margaret Eastwood, HOA president and self-appointed marina dictator, had just picked a fight with the one person who could shut down her entire operation. The next morning, I called my buddy Frank, who's been doing property surveys for 30 years. Frank, I need you to walk my property lines and mark exactly where this easement runs. Sure thing, Dale. What's this about? Let's just say I'm having a boundary dispute. Frank showed up that afternoon with his GPS equipment and orange spray paint. We walked every inch of that 50-foot easement strip. And you know what we discovered? That strip of land wasn't just the pathway to the water, it was the only pathway to the water. The marina had been built assuming permanent access through my property. Without that easement, every boat in Clearwater Marina would be as useful as a car without roads. That evening, I sat in Sarah's captain chair watching the sunset paint the water gold. The same wind chimes that used to make her smile were singing in the evening breeze. And for the first time since she passed, I smiled too. Margaret thought she could bully a grieving widower into giving up his wife's memorial boat. What she didn't realize was that she'd just handed me the keys to her kingdom. I pulled out the violation notice and read it again. Removal required within 72 hours. $500 per day after that. Well, Margaret, I thought, two can play the ultimatum game. But mine's going to be a lot more expensive than yours. The sound of expensive boat engines warming up for evening cruises drifted across the water. Cigarette boats, Hatteras yachts, custom fishing vessels worth more money than I'd see in a lifetime. All of them completely dependent on crossing a strip of land that belonged to me. I went inside and pulled out Sarah's old recipe box where she kept all our important documents. Somewhere in there was my property deed. Time to read the fine print. Margaret escalated fast. By Friday morning, I had a certified letter from Weatherby, Prescott and Associates, some fancy law firm downtown. The letterhead alone probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Cease and desist all violations of HOA compliance regulations or face legal action seeking $50,000 in damages, attorney fees, and immediate vessel removal. $50,000. My chest tightened reading those words, same way it did the day Sarah got her diagnosis. I'm living on a fixed income, Social Security and a small pension from the welding shop. 50 grand might as well be 50 million. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that letter while my coffee went cold. The morning sun streamed through Sarah's lace curtains, and I could hear those wind chimes outside, but they weren't comforting anymore. They sounded lonely. Here's what really burned me up. I looked up this law firm online. Weatherby Prescott and Associates specializes in something called community transition consulting. Sounds fancy, right? It's not. They help HOAs force out elderly residents so developers can buy up waterfront property and flip it to wealthy buyers. They've done it 12 times in the past 3 years. Harass the old-timers with violations and legal threats until they sell cheap and move away. Classic gentrification with a legal twist. But I had something they didn't know about yet. Sarah's life insurance policy had paid out enough to cover a good attorney. She always was thinking ahead, even when she was sick. I called Jackson and Associates, a property law firm that actually represents homeowners instead of bullying them. I need to understand my easement rights, I told them. That Tuesday, I met with Carol Jackson herself, 40-something, no-nonsense lawyer who drove a 10-year-old Honda and wore off-the-rack suits. My kind of people. "Tell me about this easement," she said, spreading my property documents across her desk. I explained the situation, the boat violation, Margaret's threats, the law firm letter. Carol read everything twice, then pulled out a magnifying glass to examine the 1987 easement agreement. "This is interesting," she said after 20 minutes of studying. "Your parents signed what's called a permissive use easement. It's not a permanent right-of-way." "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning you can revoke it any time with 30 days written notice. Every boat owner in that marina is essentially trespassing on your property with your permission. Permission you can withdraw." She leaned back in her chair and smiled. "How many boats are we talking about?" 200 slips. "Maybe $50 million worth of vessels." Carol's smile got wider. "And they're threatening to sue you for $50,000 over boat aesthetics." That's about the size of it. "Dale, I've been practicing property law for 20 years. This is the most one-sided leverage situation I've ever seen. You hold all the cards." Here's what I learned about easement law that day. Property access rights aren't automatic just because they've existed for years. If the original agreement allows revocation, the landowner has absolute authority to say no, no matter how inconvenient it is for everyone else. Translation: Margaret picked a legal fight with someone who owns the roads to her castle. Carol explained the process. File a formal easement termination notice with the county. Send registered letters to all affected parties. Post legal notices on the property. Wait 30 days. Then I could legally prevent any marina traffic from crossing my land. "What about their boats?" I asked. "What about them? Not your problem. They signed marina leases without ensuring permanent access rights. That's their mistake, not yours." The filing fee was $500, exactly what Margaret was charging me per day for my boat violation. Poetic justice. That evening, I stood on my dock watching the evening boat traffic. Cabin cruisers, fishing boats, sailing yachts, all motoring past my property line on their way to and from the marina. The sound of powerful engines and the smell of marine exhaust filled the air. Every single one of them was about to learn a very expensive lesson about property rights. I pulled out my phone and called Jessica in Portland. She answered on the third ring. "Hey Dad, how are you holding up?" "Better than I've been in months, sweetheart. I wanted you to know your mother's boat is staying right where it belongs." "Did you work something out with the HOA?" I watched a 60-foot Hatteras cruise past, probably heading out for a sunset dinner cruise. "You could say that. Your mom always said bullies only understand one language." "What's that?" "Consequences." The next morning, I drove back to Carol Jackson's office with a check for $500 and authorization to file the easement termination paperwork. Margaret thought she could intimidate a grieving widower with legal threats and fancy law firm letterhead. She had no idea what was coming. Margaret wasn't done. A week later, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. I got the notice slipped under my door at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, meeting scheduled for Monday at 7 a.m. Classic power move designed to limit attendance from working families. But I showed up anyway, along with about 30 other residents. The community center smelled like industrial coffee and Margaret's expensive perfume. She sat at the head table wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. "This emergency session addresses an immediate safety concern," Margaret announced. "We have an unsafe vessel creating liability issues for the entire community." Unsafe vessel. That's what she was calling Sarah's dream now. The motion was simple. condemn Dale Hutchinson's boat as a safety hazard and authorize immediate removal using community funds. $5,000 for professional towing and storage fees, to be recovered through liens against my property. In other words, they'd steal my boat and make me pay for the privilege. The vote wasn't even close. 15 wealthy yacht owners versus 3 working-class boat owners and a handful of residents who didn't care either way. Margaret had stacked the deck perfectly. But here's what she didn't know. I'd spent the past week doing homework, not just on easement law, but on marina finances. Turns out the Clearwater Marina Association had some very interesting revenue streams. Every new resident paid a $15,000 marina access fee when they bought their condo. Non-negotiable. Part of the purchase agreement. Margaret had been collecting these fees for 8 years. That's over $2 million in access fees for something my family provided for free. Free because my parents never charged for the easement. They were good neighbors back when that meant something. I started documenting everything. Every boat that crossed my property line, every time someone used the easement for marina access, every violation of my property rights that Margaret was profiting from. Saturday morning, I set up a folding chair at the edge of my property with a clipboard and stopwatch. The crunch of gravel under boat trailer tires, the squeal of hydraulic lifts, the constant parade of traffic crossing my land without permission. In 6 hours, I counted 87 boats using my easement. Cabin cruisers heading out for fishing trips, sailing yachts departing for weekend races, jet skiers towing their toys to the launch ramp, every single one technically trespassing on private property. My neighbor Tom stopped by around noon. He's the marina maintenance guy, works 6 days a week keeping these millionaires' toys floating and functional. What's with the clipboard, Dale? Just keeping track of who's using my driveway. Tom laughed, but then he saw I was serious. Margaret's really got you wound up, huh? Tom, can I ask you something? How much does the Marina Association pay in access fees for this easement? Access fees? Hell, Dale, I don't think they pay anything. Your family's always just let everyone through. That's what I thought. Tom sat down on my dock, dangling his work boots over the water. You know, Margaret's been talking about expanding the marina, adding 50 more slips on the north side. More boats? More money. She's got investors lined up. Each new slip generates about $5,000 a year in fees. I did the math. 50 new slips times $5,000 equals $250,000 in annual revenue, all dependent on crossing my property. That afternoon, I called a surveyor, not just to mark property lines this time, but to document exactly how the easement worked, where the boundaries were, what percentage of marina traffic crossed my land, how much commercial value my property access provided to the Marina Association. The surveyor's GPS equipment beeped and chirped as we walked the property lines. Orange flags marked every corner, every boundary, every foot of the easement strip. This is unusual, he said, studying his readings. The marina has no other water access. Everything goes through this 50-foot corridor. Everything? Boats, trailers, service vehicles, emergency access, utility maintenance. It's a total bottleneck. Translation: I didn't just own part of the marina's access. I owned all of the marina's access. That evening, I sat in Sarah's captain chair watching Margaret's Tesla pull into her parking spot. She walked across my easement every day going to and from the marina office. Even her daily routine depended on my property. The wind chimes sang in the evening breeze, same melody Sarah loved. But tonight they sounded different. Not lonely anymore. Determined. I pulled out my phone and called Carol Jackson. It's Dale. I want to file that easement termination. Are you sure? This is going to affect a lot of people. I watched another expensive yacht motor past my property, heading out for a sunset cruise. Margaret called my wife's boat unsafe and voted to have it stolen. I'd say she affected me first. Okay, Dale. 30 days notice starting tomorrow. I'll have the paperwork ready by morning. The next phase was about to begin. Thursday morning, I walked into the county clerk's office carrying Carol Jackson's paperwork, the same fluorescent lit room where I'd discovered the easement in the first place. But this time, I wasn't researching. I was taking action. I need to file a formal easement termination, I told the clerk. She looked over the documents, stamped them with that satisfying bureaucratic thunk, and handed me the receipt. 30-day notice period starts today. You'll need to post copies on the affected property and send registered letters to all impacted parties. All impacted parties meant every single boat owner in Clearwater Marina. 200 certified letters at $4 each. $800 to inform an entire community that their marina access was about to disappear. Money well spent. But the real revelation came that afternoon when I met with Carol to review the Marina Association's financial records, public documents, available to any community member who bothered to ask. "Look at this," Carol said, spreading spreadsheets across her desk. Marina access fees collected over 8 years, $2.3 million. For what? For the right to cross your property. Property your family has provided access to for free since 1987. I stared at those numbers. $2.3 million. Margaret had been charging residents for something that belonged to me. "There's more," Carol continued. "The Marina expansion project. They've got investors committed to financing 50 additional slips based on guaranteed access rights. Access rights they don't actually have." Exactly. The investment prospectus lists permanent marina access easement as a key asset. But your easement is revocable, has been from day one. The financial impact was staggering. Without guaranteed access, the marina expansion would collapse. Existing slips would lose significant value. Property values throughout Clearwater Point would crash. All because Margaret decided to pick on a widower's memorial boat. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "Conservative estimate, if marina access disappears, property values drop 20 to 30%. That's about $20 million in lost equity for the community. $20 million versus my $50,000 lawsuit threat. Margaret had brought a knife to a nuclear war. But here's what really got me. Carol showed me the legal correspondence between Margaret and her investors. They knew the easement was revocable. They'd done title research. They understood the risk. Margaret had been gambling with the entire community's property values, betting that a grieving widower wouldn't fight back. That evening, I drove to the Marina office to deliver Margaret's registered letter personally. She was working late, visible through the glass windows in her expensive blazer, probably calculating expansion profits. I knocked on the door. She looked up, clearly annoyed at being interrupted. "Mr. Hutchinson, what do you want?" I handed her the certified letter. "Easement termination notice, 30 days. Margaret opened the envelope and read the first paragraph. Her face went from annoyance to confusion to pure panic in about 15 seconds. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can. My property, my choice." "But the marina, the expansion, the investors." "Not my problem." Margaret's voice got shrill. "This will destroy property values for everyone. Should have thought of that before you called my wife's boat an eyesore." I walked back to my truck, leaving Margaret standing in her office doorway holding the letter that was about to change everything. The taste of victory was sweet, like Sarah's iced tea on summer afternoons, 29 days and counting. And in Sarah's captain chair that night, listening to her wind chimes, I finally understood what she used to mean about standing up to bullies. Sometimes you don't fight fire with fire. Sometimes you fight fire with a flood. Margaret thought she could drown me with legal threats and financial pressure, but I was about to show her what real leverage looks like. The countdown had begun. The next 3 weeks were the most productive I'd been since Sarah passed. Having a mission gave me purpose again. Every morning I'd sit in her captain chair with my coffee and plan the day's work. First priority, the fence. Not just any fence. This had to be absolutely legal, completely effective, and impossible to ignore. I drove out to Titan Steel Supply on the industrial side of town, where the smell of metal shavings and welding gas reminded me of 40 years in the trade. "I need 300 feet of 8-foot galvanized steel fencing," I told Bobby at the counter. "Heavy duty, commercial grade. Building Fort Knox? Something like that." The math was simple but expensive. Steel posts every 10 feet meant 30 posts. Each post needed 3 feet of concrete foundation to meet county building codes. Add the remote-controlled sliding gate, security cameras, and solar power system for off-grid operation. Total cost, $12,000. Exactly what Margaret's $50,000 lawsuit would have cost me in attorney fees. The legal strategy was Carol Jackson's masterpiece. She filed the easement termination through every proper channel: county records, state property database, federal waterway access registry. documentation so thorough that no lawyer could challenge the process. But here's the beautiful part. We scheduled the fence installation for Memorial Day weekend. Most of the wealthy boat owners would be away at their vacation homes in the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard. They'd return Tuesday to find their $50 million Marina collection trapped behind a steel wall. The timeline was military precise. Saturday, dig post holes and pour concrete. Sunday, install posts and panels. Monday, electrical work for the gate system. Tuesday morning, activate the gate and watch the chaos unfold. I recruited help from people Margaret had been treating like servants for years. Tommy Rodriguez, whose leaking boat never got a violation notice because he fixes everyone's engines for cheap. Bill Santos, who runs the Marina fuel dock and knows every boat owner's financial situation. Pete Morrison, retired electrician who'd volunteered to maintain the community dock lighting until Margaret cut his budget. Working class guys who understood what it meant to be pushed around by someone with money and lawyers. "You really gonna lock out the whole marina?" Tommy asked Saturday morning as we mixed concrete for the fence posts. 30 days notice, just like the law requires. Same as they gave me for my boat. Tommy smiled as he poured concrete around a steel post. Man, Margaret's gonna lose her mind. The technical details mattered. Each post had to be exactly aligned, perfectly plumb, and set in concrete according to county specifications. The gate system required buried electrical cables, solar panels for power, and remote control capability. I'd learned a few things about electronic gate systems over the years. The key is redundancy. Primary power from solar panels, battery backup for cloudy days, manual override for emergencies, and most importantly, remote operation from inside my house. Pete Morrison handled the electrical work like a surgeon. "This gate's going to be bulletproof," he said, connecting the final control wires. "Tamper-proof locks, motion sensors, security cameras. Nobody's getting through without your permission." The financial calculations kept me motivated. Carol had shown me exactly how much the marina generated in revenue per month. Slip fees, fuel sales, maintenance contracts, access fees, about $80,000 monthly, all dependent on crossing my 50-foot strip of land. My leverage calculation was simple. Charge $100 per month per boat for easement access. 200 boats times $100 equals $20,000 monthly, more than enough to cover my legal costs and provide Sarah's memorial boat with the protection it deserved. But the real plan wasn't about money. It was about respect. Sunday evening, with the fence nearly complete, I got a call from Jessica in Portland. "Dad, are you sure about this? It sounds pretty extreme. Your mother always said bullies don't understand anything but strength. But all those boat owners..." "Jessica, they sat in that room and voted to steal your mom's boat. They could have stood up to Margaret, but they chose the easy path. Sometimes consequences are the only teacher that works." Monday night, I did the final system test. Solar panels charged, batteries full, gate mechanism smooth and quiet, security cameras recording in high definition, remote control app working perfectly on my phone. Tom Martinez stopped by around sunset. "This is really happening?" 8 a.m. tomorrow. Gate closes, marina's closed for business. Tom grinned. Wish I could see Margaret's face. "Oh, you will. I installed cameras for that exact reason." That night, I sat in Sarah's captain chair one last time before everything changed. The marina was busy with Memorial Day traffic. Boats coming and going, owners preparing for the summer season. The sound of expensive engines and the smell of marine fuel filled the evening air. Tomorrow, it would be silent. I raised my coffee mug toward her wind chimes. "This one's for you, sweetheart." 24 hours until Margaret learned what real consequences look like. Margaret found out about the fence on Monday afternoon. I was putting the finishing touches on the gate electronics when her Tesla came screeching into my driveway, gravel spraying everywhere. She jumped out wearing what looked like a tennis outfit that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. The look on her face was priceless. Pure panic mixed with that entitled rage rich people get when the universe doesn't cooperate. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, gesturing at 300 feet of steel fencing. "Property improvement, perfectly legal according to county building codes. You can't block marina access." "Actually, I can. It's my property." Margaret's voice climbed an octave. "This is blackmail." "No, ma'am, this is capitalism. Supply, demand, and property rights." She started pacing back and forth like a caged animal, her tennis shoes crunching on my gravel driveway. I could practically see the wheels spinning in her head, trying to figure out how to solve this problem with money or lawyers. "How much?" she finally asked. "How much what?" "How much to keep the easement open?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Margaret Eastwood, HOA dictator and yacht club queen, was about to learn what negotiating from weakness felt like. $25,000 community compensation for the aesthetic damage your marina has caused to my property, I said, plus guaranteed boat slip rights for Sarah's dream at the premium location. Margaret's jaw dropped. $25,000? You're insane. Seems reasonable. You threatened to sue me for $50,000. That was different. Different how? You decided my boat was worth $50,000 in damages. I'm deciding your marina access is worth $25,000 in compensation. Fair's fair. Margaret pulled out her phone, probably calling her lawyer. I kept working on the gate controls while she paced and whispered urgently into the device. After 10 minutes, she hung up and tried a different approach. Sweet voice, fake smile, the whole manipulation playbook. "Dale, let's be reasonable here. The marina provides recreation for hundreds of families. Surely we can work something out." We already worked something out. 30 days notice, properly filed, completely legal. But think about the community impact. I did think about it. Right about the time you called my wife's memorial boat unsafe and voted to have it stolen. Margaret's fake smile cracked. This is about more than one boat. You're right. It's about respect, something you never learned. That evening, the phone calls started. First the Marina Association president, then 3 different yacht club members, then a guy who claimed to represent concerned community stakeholders. Everyone wanted to negotiate, to find a compromise to make this problem go away. I had the same answer for all of them. Talk to Margaret, she created this situation. But the really interesting call came from Tom Martinez around 9 p.m. "Dale, you need to know something. Margaret's been meeting with county inspectors all day." "What kind of inspectors?" "Building code, zoning compliance, environmental impact. She's trying to find violations to stop your fence." I wasn't surprised. When rich people can't buy their way out of trouble, they usually try to lawyer their way out. Margaret was pulling every string she had. Find anything? That's the beautiful part. Pete Morrison pulled all the proper permits. Everything's completely legal. One inspector told her the fence was the best residential construction work he'd seen all year. Tuesday morning brought a new escalation. Margaret showed up with a county sheriff's deputy thinking official uniforms might intimidate me. "Sir, we need to discuss this marina access issue," the deputy said. "Happy to discuss it. What would you like to know?" "Well, there are concerns about emergency access to the water." I handed him a copy of Carol Jackson's legal brief. "Emergency services have multiple access points through public boat ramps. This easement was never designated for emergency use." The deputy read the documents, looked at the fence, and shrugged. "Seems like a civil matter to me, ma'am. Property owner has the right to fence his land." Margaret's face went red. "But the marina!" "Ma'am, that's between you and him." After they left, I got a call from Carol Jackson. "Margaret's law firm filed for an emergency restraining order, wants a judge to force you to keep the easement open during litigation." Can they do that? They can try, but emergency orders require proof of immediate irreparable harm. Rich people having inconvenient boat access doesn't qualify. When's the hearing? Thursday morning. But Dale, they're bringing serious lawyers. This could get expensive. How expensive? Maybe $10,000 in legal fees if it drags out. I looked out at my fence, solid steel gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Carol, I've got $12,000 invested in this fence. Another 10 in legal fees is fine. Margaret started a war she can't afford to lose." The battle lines were drawn. 24 hours until the gate closed and the real fight began. Wednesday night, Margaret made her final desperate move, and she made it at 2 a.m., thinking darkness would hide her crime. But I hadn't slept well since Sarah passed, and the motion sensors on my security system were more reliable than Swiss clockwork. My phone buzzed with alerts just after 2:15 a.m. I looked at the security camera feed and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Margaret's Tesla was parked at the edge of my property. She was directing 3 men with sledgehammers toward my fence posts, pointing and gesturing like a general commanding troops. Criminal trespass, property destruction, conspiracy to commit vandalism. All captured in high-definition video with perfect audio. I called 911 from my bedroom window, watching Margaret's crew attack my fence like they were storming a castle. The sound of steel on steel rang through the quiet night. 911, what's your emergency? Property destruction in progress. 3 men with sledgehammers attacking my fence. I have them on security video. We'll dispatch units immediately. It took the sheriff's department 12 minutes to arrive. 12 minutes of Margaret thinking she could solve her problem with hired muscle and middle-of-the-night crime. But here's what Margaret didn't know about steel fence construction. Pete Morrison had anchored those posts in 3 feet of reinforced concrete. Her sledgehammer crew managed to scratch the paint and dent one panel. The fence held like a fortress. When the deputies arrived with flashing lights and sirens, Margaret tried to play innocent. Officers, we were just inspecting potential safety hazards with this illegal fence. Ma'am, safety inspections don't happen at 2 a.m. with sledgehammers. The lead deputy, Sergeant Rodriguez, looked at my security footage on his tablet. Crystal clear video of Margaret pointing at fence posts while her crew attacked them with tools. Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal mischief, trespassing, and conspiracy to commit property destruction. Watching Margaret get handcuffed in her designer athleisure wear was better than Christmas morning. Her fake nails clicking against the steel handcuffs. Her perfectly styled hair getting messed up as she struggled. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. You can call from the station, ma'am. Thursday's emergency court hearing was a disaster for Margaret's legal team. Turns out judges don't appreciate property owners who try to solve legal disputes with midnight sledgehammer attacks. Your Honor, Margaret's lawyer argued, the easement closure will cause irreparable harm to Marina access. Judge Harrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, wasn't impressed. Counselor, your client was arrested last night for attempting to destroy the fence with hired vandals. Are you seriously asking this court to reward criminal behavior? That was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. A misunderstanding caught on security video. Judge Harrison held up still frames from my cameras. Mr. Hutchinson, has your client offered any compensation for this attempted property destruction? Carol Jackson stood up. No, Your Honor. In fact, the defendant has refused to pay for fence repairs and has threatened additional legal action. Motion denied. Mr. Hutchinson has absolute right to control access to his property. If the Marina Association wants easement access, they can negotiate compensation like any other business arrangement. Margaret's insurance company dropped her that afternoon. Turns out, intentional property destruction voids liability coverage. Her criminal charges meant personal financial responsibility for any damages or lawsuits. The phone calls that evening were desperate. Marina Association board members, yacht club officers, even the mayor's office. Everyone suddenly wanted to negotiate. But I had one answer. The gate closes tomorrow morning as scheduled. Anyone wanting access after that can submit written proposals through my attorney. Tom Martinez stopped by around sunset with inside information from the Marina office. Margaret's in full panic mode, he said. She's been calling investors all day, trying to explain why the expansion project is collapsing. What are they saying? They want their deposits back. $2 million in development funding gone. The Marina Association doesn't have that kind of cash. Bankruptcy? Unless they can get easement access restored fast. And word's getting out about Margaret's arrest. The yacht club's talking about removing her from all leadership positions. That night, I did final checks on the fence and gate system. Solar panels charged, batteries full, cameras recording, remote control tested and ready. Everything perfect. I sat in Sarah's captain chair one last time before the Marina went silent. The evening boat traffic was lighter than usual. Word had spread about tomorrow's deadline. Smart owners were getting their boats out before the gate closed. The wind chimes sang their gentle song, same melody that brought Sarah peace during her final months. Tomorrow would bring chaos, confrontation, and consequences. But tonight, everything was calm. I raised my coffee mug toward the Marina lights reflecting on the water. Sarah, justice is coming, just like you always said it would. 8 hours until Margaret's world changed forever. Tuesday morning, May 30th, 8 a.m. sharp. I sat in my kitchen with coffee and Sarah's old recipe box, watching the security cameras on my tablet. 57 boat owners were returning from Memorial Day weekend, expecting normal Marina access. Instead, they found 300 feet of 8-foot steel fence with a locked gate and a large sign. Private property, easement terminated, no Marina access. I pressed the app on my phone. The remote gate mechanism engaged with a satisfying mechanical thunk. Locked tight. Game over. The first car arrived at 8:15 a.m., a silver BMW towing a 28-foot contender. The driver got out, walked to the gate, pulled on the handle. Nothing. He read the sign, pulled out his phone, started making calls. By 8:45, there were 37 vehicles backed up on Marina Drive. Boat trailers, RVs towing jet skis, luxury cars full of families returning from weekend trips. The smell of boat exhaust mixed with frustrated voices carried across the water. At 9:20, Margaret arrived in her Tesla, still wearing yesterday's clothes and looking like she hadn't slept. She marched to the gate and started yanking on it like a woman possessed. "Dale!" she screamed toward my house. "Open this gate right now!" I finished my coffee, walked outside, and stood on my deck where everyone could see me. About 50 people had gathered by then, all staring at the fence that separated them from $50 million worth of trapped boats. "Morning, Margaret. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "You can't do this. It's illegal." "Actually, it's completely legal. Filed all the proper paperwork, followed every regulation. Carol Jackson made sure of that." Margaret's voice cracked with desperation. "But our boats, the Marina." "Not my problem. You had 30 days to negotiate." That's when Channel 7 News arrived, then Channel 12, then a reporter from the Tribune with a photographer. Word about a $50 million marina shutdown spreads fast in a waterfront community. Sheriff Deputy Martinez showed up around 10 a.m. to manage crowd control. The parking situation had become a traffic hazard, with boat trailers blocking the main road. "Mr. Hutchinson," he called out, "we need to discuss this situation." "Happy to discuss it, Deputy. What would you like to know?" "Well, there's some concern about public safety with all these blocked vehicles." I handed him a copy of my easement termination documents and Carol Jackson's legal opinion. "Everything's filed properly, Deputy. These folks just need to find alternative marina access." Margaret pushed through the crowd, desperation making her voice shrill. "There is no alternative access. This is the only way to reach the marina. Should have thought of that before you threatened to steal my boat." The crowd was getting ugly. 50 boat owners who'd just discovered their expensive toys were trapped behind steel barriers, vacation plans ruined, fishing trips canceled, racing competitions missed. "How much?" shouted a man in a Rolex and polo shirt. "How much to open the damn gate?" "No amount," I replied. "The easement is terminated. Anyone wanting access can submit written proposals through my attorney." That's when Margaret snapped completely. She grabbed the fence with both hands and started shaking it, screaming about lawsuits and property rights and community destruction. "You're destroying everyone's property values," she yelled. "Funny. That's exactly what you threatened to do to me." A woman with a $40,000 Rolex started crying. "Our boat's been in the family for 20 years. Ma'am, I'm sorry for your inconvenience, but this situation was created by your HOA president, not by me." That's when the crowd turned on Margaret. 50 angry boat owners who'd just learned their marina access was gone because she'd picked a fight with the wrong widower. "Margaret, you said this was handled. You told us the easement was permanent. We paid marina fees based on guaranteed access." Margaret tried to maintain control. "Everyone calm down. We'll get lawyers. We'll fix this." "With what money?" shouted the man in the Rolex. "My slip fees are paid through October." I pulled out the security footage from her midnight sledgehammer attack and showed it to the news cameras. This is how Mrs. Eastwood tried to solve the problem: criminal trespass and property destruction. The crowd's anger shifted entirely to Margaret. 50 wealthy boat owners, realizing their marina access had been destroyed by their own HOA president's arrogance and criminal behavior. Channel 7's reporter, a sharp young woman named Katie Morrison, interviewed me on camera. "Mr. Hutchinson, what would it take to restore marina access?" "Ma'am, this started because Mrs. Eastwood called my late wife's memorial boat an eyesore and threatened to have it stolen. The Marina Association has shown zero respect for property rights or basic human decency. Until that changes, the gate stays closed." "Any final words for the boat owners?" I looked directly into the camera. "Your HOA president gambled your marina access on a legal fight she couldn't win. Maybe it's time for new leadership that understands what negotiation actually means." Margaret was arrested again at 11:47 a.m. for disturbing the peace and making terroristic threats against my property. The last thing I heard as the crowd dispersed was boat owners demanding her immediate resignation from all HOA positions. Justice served cold, just like Sarah always promised. The marina stayed closed for 8 days. 8 days of empty water where million-dollar boats used to cruise. 8 days of Margaret's complete downfall and the community learning what consequences really mean. By Thursday, the Marina Association had fired Margaret and elected an emergency board. By Friday, 3 different law firms were representing boat owners in class action suits against the old HOA leadership. By Monday, Margaret's house was quietly listed for sale. The new Marina board, led by Tom Martinez and 2 other working-class boat owners, called Carol Jackson Tuesday morning. "Mr. Hutchinson, we'd like to negotiate a fair easement agreement." Their offer was reasonable, $150,000 in community compensation, plus guaranteed premium slip assignment for Sarah's dream, plus monthly easement fees structured fairly for all boat owners. No more $15,000 access fees for new residents. No more selective enforcement. No more discrimination against working families. Most importantly, the new Marina bylaws included a residents' grievance process and required supermajority votes for any boat restrictions. No more Margaret-style dictatorships. I reopened the gate on Wednesday morning, exactly 1 week after the shutdown. The sound of boat engines warming up for the first time in 8 days was like music. The smell of marine fuel and salt air felt like freedom. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching the community transform from Margaret's toxic hierarchy into something that actually served its residents. Working families had voices again. Elderly property owners had protection against harassment. The marina became a place where a retired welder's fishing boat could share dock space with million-dollar yachts. I used $50,000 of the settlement to establish the Sarah's Dream Maritime Scholarship Fund. Every year it provides boat safety courses, marina access, and fishing education for working families who can't afford yacht club membership fees. The first recipient was Tom Martinez's grandson, Diego, a 12-year-old who'd been cleaning boat hulls for pocket money while dreaming of having his own fishing boat someday. "Mr. Hutchinson," Diego said when I handed him his first set of fishing gear, "my grandpa says your wife would have loved teaching kids about boats." Standing on the dock where Sarah and I spent so many sunrise mornings, watching this kid's eyes light up with the same wonder she'd always felt on the water, I knew we'd done something good. Something that honored her memory while protecting other families from bullies like Margaret. The marina expansion project died when the investors pulled out, but the community didn't need it anyway. The existing slips were more than adequate once they stopped being used as weapons for discrimination. Margaret eventually pleaded guilty to misdemeanor property destruction and paid for fence repairs. Her criminal record made HOA leadership positions impossible, which was fine with everyone. Last I heard, she'd moved to a high-rise condo in the city where someone else handles community management. Every Saturday morning now, I start the day in Sarah's captain chair with my coffee, listening to her wind chimes sing in the morning breeze. But I'm not alone anymore. Diego comes by for fishing lessons. Tom stops by with marina updates, and Carol Jackson occasionally joins me for coffee and legal war stories. The annual Community on the Water Festival has become Clearwater Point's biggest event. Free boat safety classes, marine environment education, fishing tournaments for kids, and a memorial regatta honoring residents who've passed. Sarah would have loved watching working families and yacht club members sharing the same water with mutual respect instead of suspicion. But the best part is knowing that no future Margaret can terrorize grieving widowers or working families. The new community bylaws, backed by established legal precedent, protect property rights and require actual negotiation instead of ultimatums. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always arrives eventually. Speaking of justice, next week I'm sharing another story about consequences for entitled behavior. A woman tried to steal my parking spot for 6 months, using her BMW to block my car whenever she felt like it. So I bought the entire parking lot and banned her car permanently. Hit subscribe if you want to hear how that turned out. And please, share your worst HOA nightmare stories in the comments. I read every single one, and your experiences help other people understand they're not alone in fighting community bullies. Sarah always said bullies only understand one language: consequences. Thanks to all of you supporting this channel, we're teaching that language one story at a time. Until next time, remember, know your rights, document everything, and never let someone else's money intimidate you into accepting injustice.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.